Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books are sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
Hi, everyone. Dan here. Just wanted to give a quick note at the beginning here. If you're a dedicated listener to the show, you might be expecting to hear part 2 of our 1984 in sports episode. Please don't be alarmed. That episode is coming very soon, but we wanted to get this one out as soon as we could because it's about an Olympic topic, and we're hoping to get it on while the Olympics were still underway and the U.S. men's basketball team was playing, because it sort of ties in with what we talk about on the podcast. So 1984 soon, 2004 men's Olympic basketball here. Enjoy.
Hello, old sports, and welcome to another episode of the Hello Old Sports podcast on the Sports History Network. We are rapidly approaching 100 episodes of the Hello Old Sports podcast in just under 4 years. So we want to thank you and let you all know that we appreciate the fandom and the following and the support over the last almost 4 years and almost 100 episodes. I'm your co-host, Dan Newman, and I am joined, as always, by my brother and co-host, Andrew Newman. Andrew, how are you doing tonight?
I'm fine. I mean, I won't bring my annoyances outside of the show onto here. So let's just say I'm doing well. No, I could give you a list of my problems, but who would care? No, I'm all right. I'm unfortunately in that time between vacations that they call having to go to work every day, but thankfully that will there'll be a secession of that in two more days, and I'll be back on vacation.
I think you mean cessation, but that's fine.
Secession. No, I'm going to secede from work. That's my plan. What was it? Where was I going with that? I don't really. Oh yeah, you said we're approaching 100 episodes, which means we are approaching roughly 350 hours of content on the show so far. But today's a topic that I think is I don't know. I don't see a lot of coverage on this one, so I think it'll be fun to discuss.
Before we start, I feel like I haven't listed our information in a few episodes, so. Look for us on Facebook. You can just search for Sports History Network podcast. Email the show at hellooldsports@gmail.com. We do get some emails from time to time with various things. You can check out the whole Sports History Network at sportshistorynetwork.com. Lots of good stuff, good podcasts and everything going on there. And just reach out to us any way you can and give us a rating, review, iTunes, Spotify, wherever it is you may get and listen to your podcasts. So Andrew, this was your idea, so why don't you maybe tell us a little bit about tonight's episode. We're going to travel back in time 20 years to the 2004 men's Olympic basketball team.
Right. So as we're recording this, it's a couple of days before the opening ceremonies of the 2024 Olympics. I think there might actually been a few events that started today. I know in like soccer and rugby and stuff, and I think hockey and the Winter Olympics, just the nature of the games, you can't play 2 games in 2 days or whatever. So they have to start those a few days before the opening ceremony. So as we're recording that, it's kind of an Olympic themed one. And I was just kind of thinking about, and this is a topic that I remember. Obviously, I was 18 years old when it happened, but it was like right as I was going from high school, like living at home, to going to college for the first time. I hadn't thought about it in a long time. And the 2004 men's basketball team, which became dubbed as the nightmare team, the team that that won the bronze medal, which, they'd won the bronze medal one other time. But the thing, the sort of the headline about that team was they lost 3 games in that Olympics. The entire history of the U.S. Olympic basketball team, the U.S. men's national team in the Olympics going all the way back to 1936, had lost 2 games total prior to that. And one of those was the gold medal game in 1972, where they basically just kept restarting the game until they lost. So, it's certainly a team that was very disappointing. As with everything, there were a lot of different factors in play, but, sort of gets boiled down to whatever somebody's specific talking point that they want to bring up was. If you're an international basketball fan or from one of those other countries, it showed how international basketball had just caught up. If you're a fan of a certain type of basketball, it shows that, all-star teams without chemistry don't work well together. If you're mad about the guys who decided not to play, it was their fault because they didn't play in the game. All of those things are true to a degree.
And I could throw 2 more on there. First of all, if you were a critic of sort of the young, sort of, I don't want to use the word thuggish, but kind of, young, flashy Iverson, LeBron type of guy, Marbury type of guy, Carmelo, you can look at that. And if you're somebody who thinks that Larry Brown is just kind of a jackass, you can look at that too. So there's just a couple more there.
And it's also, there was sort of the thing too of, and this comes up in one of the oral histories, but for some reason there was a permission structure in place for people in this country to root against them somehow as not, so there's a lot at play, a lot of it that reflects on, the nature of the NBA at the time, but it's something that I haven't really seen covered in depth. It's something I didn't know a ton about in depth other than sort of what I remember and the top line of the Wikipedia page. So that's why I thought it would be something that would be interesting to cover. The 92 team has been covered from every conceivable angle. The 08 team, the redeemed team, who I'm sure will come up at the end of this, has been covered quite a bit. You don't hear a lot about this 04 team except as a sort of opening chapter to the story of the 08 team. So I figured we should dig into it.
So I guess the sort of the thumbnail of the history real quick is from 36, when basketball first became an Olympic sport, until 1984. And we actually just talked about the 1984 men's Olympic basketball team in a recent episode when we talked about 1984 in sports. Other than the World War II years, which I guess was 40 and 44 that they missed, and then other than that 72 team, which was the Munich Olympics and the like you said, when they restarted the game all those times in a row, U.S. men's basketball team had never lost a gold medal. 2004 or 1988 rather, they lose, and that is sort of the impetus for starting to bring in professional players. 92, it truly is sort of a dream team in 92. There was a question about whether Jordan would play. There was a question about whether Magic and Bird would play, but those guys all end up playing. The only one who really doesn't play in 92 that could be considered sort of one of the greatest players in the world, one of the greatest players in American professional basketball, is Akeem Olajuwon, and he can't play in 92 because he's not yet an American citizen. And then 96, it's sort of the same thing. Akeem's a citizen by this point. You get some guys in 96 that had previously been there in 92, and then you start to get the Shaqs and those types of guys, Grant Hill, and then sort of the same thing in 2000. But I kind of feel like every year starting in 96, it's just a little bit less kind of an honor. Guys are starting to opt out of it more and more. And one of the major themes is that by 2004, a lot of guys are less interested in playing than than they would have been even a few years earlier.
Yeah. And by the way, just as I looked this up, going back to the carefree days of Berlin 1936, do you know what the final score of the gold medal game was when the U.S. beat Canada in the 1936 Olympics?
I'm going to say 38-33.
19-8.
Oh, jeez.
Was the final score. But anyway, so yeah, so and really it started even earlier than 92. Or it's not 92. It started in 94, Dream Team 2 at the World Championships. And that was, a lot of those guys in 92, Larry Bird's career was over. Magic Johnson's career was over, although he, as we talked about in a recent episode, did come back. Michael was always going to be short-lived with that. There was some guys still left on the 94 team, but a theme that comes up with the Olympics, not just in basketball, but in everything, is there are sports where the Olympics is the pinnacle of what you can do in that sport. Swimming, track, to be honest, most of them. But then there are sports, and it's not just the, North American sports like basketball. There's golf, tennis, even soccer, the world's game. If you didn't know anything about the structure of, the only thing I'll say with boxing is, I don't know if pros box. I think that might still mostly be amateurs.
Yeah, you might be right about that.
It might be a different thing. Like the best boxers in the world don't go to the Olympics. But if you didn't know anything about the structure of international soccer, unlike me, who knows much about it, you would think, the Olympics is where the biggest soccer tournament in the world is played. And Olympic soccer is really on a much lower level than the World Cup. It's kind of an afterthought.
Yeah.
So there are a few sports, and in a lot of ways, the higher profile ones, where the Olympics is not the be all and end all. Especially for a country like the United States in basketball, where it's kind of assumed and has mostly been true that if we can throw a team out there of either the best college players or the best professional players, they should win the gold medal fairly easily. So you end up with guys, and I think we can talk about the list of guys and their various reasons for opting out of playing that year. And I'm going to see if I can pull the composition of the team up. But between injury, let's just kind of go back to 2004 and say, who are the best players in the NBA at that point? You're just coming off the end of the Shaq Kobe Laker dynasty. Kobe Bryant is dealing with the fallout of the sexual assault trial in Colorado. That might still be going on. Shaquille O'Neal is getting later in his career. He is, I believe, recovering from some sort of surgery. So he ends up not playing. There's a number of players who, for various reasons, here we go. So the other one I didn't even think about was the first Summer Olympics held post September 11th.
Yeah, and I think a lot of guys use that as an excuse not to go. Mm-hmm. Something that I thought was interesting was that in 2003, they had the Tournament of the Americas, which is the qualifying tournament for the Olympics for basically Western Hemisphere teams, North and South America. In 92, because I looked this up and I was a little curious, in 92, that was actually immediately before the Olympics was. But somewhere along the line, and I don't know why they did this. I don't know. Hold on. Let me see if I can find this list here.
And I believe the North American and South American used to be separate tournaments, and they were the two champions. There was a tournament to unify those in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, in 1979.
He's making a wrestling reference. It took me a minute to figure out what he was talking about. So it's now called the FIBA AmeriCup. And let me just look at the results here. Where are the results of this here through the years? Okay, here we go. So yeah, in 92, it was the Olympic qualifier, and it was held right before the Olympics. I think it was held in like July. And I don't know, maybe when the Olympics are plays a role in this somehow. But I guess okay, so that was I guess the last time that they had it the same year as the Olympics, that it was the qualifier. But in 2003 in Puerto Rico, they have the Tournament of the Americas, and it's basically what everybody thinks is going to be the Olympic team, except I found 5 guys here that were on that team that did not end up going to the Olympics the following year, including Jason Kidd, who's the best point guard in the game. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
List them off because I have this list on Bleacher Report of various guys who didn't play for various reasons on the 04 team. So list your 5 players, and I'll say what this list, says they missed for.
Jason Kidd.
All right, Kidd. It says was had microfracture surgery.
Kidd had also after having joined the Nets, had gone deep into the playoffs in 02, 03, and then again, they didn't make it to the finals in 04, but again in 04. Ray Allen had a pregnant fiance. Tracy McGrady.
McGrady was planning to get married.
That's a little weak.
I'll explain why. So this thing says Vince Carter got married, Kevin Garnett married, McGrady planning to get married.
Vince Carter, you just said he was getting married.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess maybe it's only 4 because I listed Ray Allen twice. So okay.
So the ones I have in the married section, it's Carter, Garnett, McGrady, and Ray Allen with a pregnant fiance. Jason Kidd had microfracture surgery. Mike Bibby and Tracy McGrady begged off, citing the security issues. Now, again, you could look back and go, they're using that as an excuse, and maybe they were. It was it's 3 years after 9/11. They're going it may have been legitimate, is all I'm saying. And then the other 3 mentioned here are Shaquille O'Neal, Jermaine O'Neal, and Ben Wallace, all cited that they made deep runs in the playoffs. Obviously, O'Neal and Wallace both played in the finals that year, and they said they were too wiped out. And Shaq at that point was, this was the same era as getting the surgery at the beginning of the season because he got hurt on company time. He was not, of any of those guys, he was the one who was least likely to play in this at this point.
And of those guys, so here's, I had listed a few of the guys, but actually there are even more who didn't play. Kidd didn't, Tracy McGrady didn't, Jermaine O'Neal didn't, Vince Carter, Bibby, Kenyon Martin, Ray Allen, Elton Brand. So now who knows? Maybe some of these guys they didn't necessarily need, but yeah, there's like half the team that goes in 03 doesn't go in 04. And I think it's kind of assumed that whoever you take that year before is basically the team you're hoping to bring to the Olympics, or at least if a guy's there, the year before, you think he's at least going to want to go to the Olympics. Sometimes you'll get players that go to the Olympics that don't want to play in this thing the year before, but it doesn't usually happen the other way, where they play in the qualifying tournament but then don't play in the actual Olympics.
So I guess we should just talk about the team they do have. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the names, 3 of them in particular, you go, wow, that's still a really good team. And look, the subtext of all this team still should have won the gold medal. We're going to get into all the things that happened, but like with the collection of talent they had, they still should have won the gold medal. The 3 guys who jump out at you at the start are LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony, and Dwyane Wade. Now, all 3 of them, and as we talk, LeBron James is getting ready to play in the Olympics this year, which will be his last. They had all just finished their rookie seasons. And remember, Carmelo had come right out of college, or LeBron had come right out of high school. Carmelo had played 1 year in college. So LeBron James was 19 years old in the Olympics. Now, yeah, he was still a really, really good player, but it's not the LeBron of even 2 or 3 years later. Carmelo Anthony's 20 years old. Dwyane Wade is 22 years old. So the rest of the team, I have it in age order, so I'll go in age order.
And
LeBron
I should
James,
just note,
Carmelo.
average age of this team is 23.6 years, which is very, very young.
Yep, nobody's over 30. So LeBron James, 19 years old, Carmelo Anthony, 20, Amari Stoudemire, 21, Emeka Okafor, 21, Dwyane Wade, 22, Carlos Boozer, 22, Richard Jefferson, 24, Lamar Odom, 24, Sean Marion, 26, Stephon Marbury, 27, Tim Duncan, one of the captains, 28, and Allen Iverson, the other captain, 29 years old. So a very, very young team. Lots of guys with no, very, very little NBA experience. And
in the case of Okafor, never.
Yeah, that's right. Never with him. So, clearly the team, Duncan, Iverson, and then a big drop off. And even if you want to include Marbury, who's probably at the height of his powers at that point, or actually is probably a few years past them, even at 27, but a big drop off after the top 2 or 3 guys, which is funny when you're talking about people like LeBron and Carmelo, but they're still teenagers at this point.
Something else here. From 92 to 96, 5 guys who were on the 92 team played on the 96 team. David Robinson, Pippen, Barkley, Karl Malone, and John Stockton. From 96 to 2000, let me count this up here. It's not as many, but Gary Payton is one. Is it only one, maybe? Interesting. I thought it was more, but it might actually only be one. Okay. All right. So they had only carried over one. They had only carried over Gary Payton from 96 to 2000. I thought they had carried over more, but then Penny Hardaway is 2. Okay. So it might be 2 guys. So not a ton, but at least a couple of guys who had been on the team in 96 are there in 2000. In 2004, they bring in a team with no Olympic, which I guess is, given some of the ages that you just listed and the fact that the guys were so new, and quite, LeBron and had come right out of high school and some of these other guys 1 year of college, not entirely surprising, but they're taking a team with 0 guys who had participated in the Olympics previously.
And to sort of round things out here, to coach this team is going to be Larry Brown, who is at that point 63 years old. So, a good 35 years older than his oldest player on the team. He's coming off a championship with the Pistons, arguably the sort of pinnacle of his career as an NBA coach. They would get back to the finals the next year, but, a great Pistons win over a heavily favored Lakers team that had a lot more talent. He'd been with the Sixers a couple of years earlier when they got to the NBA finals. So he's got some experience with Iverson. He's, been a bunch of different places, Indiana before that. He was at Kansas in college, but he is not just generationally older than his players physically. He's at least a generation and a half older than them from a basketball standpoint. The NBA changed a lot in the couple of years immediately post-lockout. Jordan had left the stage. Stockton, not that Stockton was like a seminal figure in the NBA, but, that kind of basketball was being, I guess you could say the early 2000s, the first 5 years of the 2000s, was really kind of the dawn of the, I don't want to say hip hop era of basketball because I sound like I should be, writing this in an op-ed in the National Review or something like that. But, it was a very different game than it had been 5 years ago. So Larry Brown, a guy who, cut his teeth in basketball in the 50s or 60s, I guess 50s probably would have been early, but, the 60s. And here he is coaching this team, not just of NBA aged players, guys who are 19 years old, guys who are 21 years old. And the older couple of the second and third oldest guys on the team are Iverson and Marbury, who are very associated with sort of that, being on the cutting edge of a lot of that. So it's just a very different. It's a clash of sort of everything.
And he doesn't help himself because he really sort of alienates the players, even from just an on the court point of view. I read something in one of the articles that in the year before, during the Tournament of the Americas, when Jason Kidd was still playing on the team, he basically says, and let me see, maybe I can find the.
I have the quote if you want it.
Is this where he tells him? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So this is from Richard Jefferson, who he told it to NBC Sports. He said, "I remember the qualifier for the Olympics. He told Jason Kidd, 'Hey, Jason, I know you're really good at the fast break, but I want you to stop at the free throw line and throw a bounce pass to one of the wings.' And you're sitting here talking to the second all-time leading assist guy and one of the most dominant point guards of all time. Truth be told, that's probably why 9 guys decided they didn't want to go to the Olympics."
Mm-hmm. So there's all these strikes against it. It's 9/11 and sort of the carryover there. It's sort of, this is now the 4th time. So it's gotten kind of old. I mean, I think that in some ways, and professional sports are going to do this. Any sport, any entertainment venue is going to do this, but they kept trying to brand it as like, well, this is the next dream team. And it's just that dream team experience was such a singular thing that by the third or fourth time that you were really doing this, it was, it wasn't as special. And they kind of, by trying to pretend it was special, I think they might have turned players off from trying to, wanting to join the team again.
Well, they referred to that 94 team as Dream Team 2.
Which was stupid.
Yeah. By 2000, they were still doing it. 2000 might have been the end of it, but they absolutely called that team Dream Team 4.
Yeah.
Which you kind of wonder, well, what about the 90,
98, whatever those are, yeah.
Whatever. So, and real quick on this oral history I have from GQ from 14 years ago now, they have a quote from David Stern, and he says, "I don't use the words dream team, okay? There was one dream team and only one dream team." So David Stern was of a similar mind to you in this regard. And I agree with you. But yeah, the idea of, we're going to get to see all these pros on the same team, the novelty of that had long since worn off, and it became, well, they better win the gold medal. They're, USA basketball. So, and then especially when it's not, wow, Magic and Bird on the same team. It's like, oh, Stephon Marbury and Sean Marion. It's like, I guess they probably had been mates in Phoenix, but you know what I mean? It's not going to be the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know where you want to take this. The only other thing I do have some things about sort of Larry Brown's kind of his attempts to discipline his players. He actually tries to kick Stephon Marbury off the team a week before the Olympic Games start because he finds out that Marbury made some comments to a reporter about his coaching style. So a week before the Olympics are scheduled to start, he tries to kick Stephon Marbury off the team.
So he said the quote was given to Chris Sheridan of ESPN. He said, Coach Brown isn't letting us play. He's trying to make us play the right way. He's not letting us play. We just need to play. When Sheridan relayed the information to assistant coach Greg Popovich, Spurs head man played telephone and passed the details back to Brown. "I want him off the team. I want Stephon Marbury off the team now. Put him on a plane back home. Put him on a plane and send him back home," Brown said to the USA basketball contingent. Now, so Brown doesn't get his wish. The U.S. team goes into but this was Athens, right? Yeah, at the Athens Olympics. I get that in Sydney in 2000 mixed up.
He also, just as you just mentioned, at one time he also, I don't know, maybe if you have when this was, at one point he benched Stoudemire, Iverson, and James, keeping in mind that Iverson is one of his co-captains. He benches those 3 guys at one point for tardiness. which is, that's on them to a degree too. It's not like, but the fact that has to be going on in Olympics is less than optimal.
Well, and it's the kind of thing of it again, and not to compare everything to the 92 team, but the 92 team, and most of those guys were much later in their career, but Michael Jordan made it very clear to Chuck Daly that his priority was playing as much golf as possible when they were, in the lead up to the Olympics. I know the quote is, I forget who, I don't know if it was Krzyzewski or whoever the assistant was, but who went with detailed practice notes to Chuck Daly, and Chuck Daly was just like, yeah, don't, we're fine. I think you need to just learn to ignore a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
Again, different, but those stories, if they had somehow got beat in that, those stories would have taken on a different tenor. So with this, it's Herb Brooks was great for being a disciplinarian and, making his players hate him because they beat the Soviets. Otherwise, he was just a jerk who was riding his players way too hard, but it worked. You know what I mean? So Brown trying to run a tight ship would have been okay if it worked. But since it didn't work, it was obviously sort of a disastrous approach to take.
It was.
And I saw a quote, and I can't find it just now, but somebody basically said, we should have just sent the Pistons.
Yeah, I saw that too. We should have just
they let Larry Brown go over there with the Pistons, and that would have been fine, and they would have been okay. But
and it's interesting too, because, and maybe this is a conversation for the end of this, but in a lot of ways, that's what they end up doing in subsequent years, is that they do sort of look at it more as a sort of, they're putting together a unit. And so, this is just the most recent example, but in 2020, technically actually played in 2021, Popovich is the coach, and he brings over a couple of guys who were never even NBA all-stars. He brings over Jeremy Grant and Keldon Johnson, who I think was one of his guys from San Antonio. Yeah, he's with the Spurs, still is to this day. JaVale McGee, who I remember for all those years as a Wizard, who's just a long-time journeyman, had been on Golden State and was actually later with the Lakers. So Popovich probably takes it to an extreme, and this year's team is, I think, all guys who have been multi-time all-stars. But that, after 2004, that approach does definitely start to develop a little bit, where we're building a team here, not just let's pick the 12 best guys and send them to the world stage.
Yeah, and the other thing we should mention, and it'll come up a little more later, is, and I made reference to it at the beginning, international basketball is getting better. That's not necessarily an excuse for what happened here, but I think a couple of things happened, and people who know about international basketball will probably be banging their heads on the desk for how much I'm about to simplify this, but several things happened. One, the Dream Team was incredibly influential. You hear stories about players. I think Dirk Nowitzki was one of them, who talked about, my first, exposure to basketball was the Dream Team. And a lot of basketball becoming the international game it is today. Obviously, there was always Olympic Games, but becoming the international sport it is today starts with the Dream Team. And that was, 12 years ago at this point. So, the 10 and 12 and 14-year-old kids who watched those teams in South America, Eastern Europe, all of these places are now guys in their 20s who have been, playing basketball at a much higher level than anybody else in the world had prior to that.
Yeah. So you look, for instance, at the gold medal team, Argentina, and I may actually be even missing some of these, but Manu Ginobili, who's an all-time great, but he's close. He's a Hall of Famer. Luis Scola, who plays for years in the NBA. Fabricio Oberto, who was on a couple of the Spurs championship teams. Andres Nocioni, Carlos Delfino. China's got Yao Ming and I don't know, how do you pronounce it? Jianlan, I believe.
I think the chairman.
Yeah, that's right. I'm just
Yijian Leon or whatever. I forget. Yeah, something like that.
Serbia and Montenegro, Vladimir Radmanovic, Nenad Kristic, who was with the Knicks for a couple of years. Spain's got Jose Calderon, Pau Gasol, which is a pretty big deal. I don't know why his brother's not on the team, but they got Pau Gasol, and then I'm just looking here, see if there's anything else. Australia, Andrew Bogut, anybody else here? Who does Lithuania have? Anybody? Nobody jumps out for Lithuania. Puerto Rico, who I believe the U.S. loses to in the opening game, right?
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. Yeah,
Carlos Arroyo on Puerto Rico. So, not all of those names blow you away, but a couple of them are, really, really good players. If you think about it, I mean, there's probably 8 or 9 guys on that U.S. team who didn't have as good of a professional career as Pau Gasol or Manu Ginobili. So it's really is starting to even out.
So they open up pool play against Puerto Rico, and it's in a lot of ways, this is the worst one because they lose by 19 points to Puerto Rico. It's a game they're down by 22 early. I have a quote here from Tom Tolbert, who was a color commentator on ESPN at that time. And the quote is, "In our first game, Puerto Rico whacked us by 19. After that, I think teams stopped being intimidated. It was almost like Rocky hitting Drago over the left eye and Rocky's trainer saying, 'See, he's just a man.'" There's a quote from, this thing's good because it incorporates a bunch of them. There's a quote from Karsten Mayer, who was a reporter for Stuttgarter Nachrichten in Germany.
Yeah, it's Germany, Stuttgart. Yeah.
Apologies to my German ancestors for how I probably pronounced that second word. He said, "I can't understand why they are so bad. Why are they so bad?" There was a quote, and then Chuck Daly said, "I was talking to one of the Puerto Rican players. He was 40 years old." So it's just like, it's a guy who's just 40. I mean, and then Peter Vesey from the New York Post said, "You could have sent the Bobcats, who've never played a game, and they should have won this championship. It's a joke. Come on, Puerto Rico." Now, that might be not giving those teams enough credit, to be fair, but I think there is something to say about the air of invincibility of the U.S. team being taken away. It's the first time the U.S. team made up of professionals has lost a game. And not only did they lose, they lost to Puerto Rico and they were blown out. They lost by 19.
This is a quote from a reporter. It says, "The team looked, especially during the second period where I don't have it right in front of me, but they were dreadfully outscored in the second period." They said, as though they didn't really care. And then he said, "Losing was a possibility, but only against a traditionally strong rival, not against an island that many Americans believe they own." And Brown says after the game, "We have to become a team in a short period of time. Throw your egos out the window." Let me see if I can pull up real quick the box score from this game here. Is that, yeah, so where's the it doesn't really, so Basketball Reference doesn't have the quarter by quarter, so I guess it's going to be hard to pull up right away. But yeah, so I think if there were any questions that this team was not just going to walk through the Olympics again, and we could talk about this maybe a little bit in a minute, but they'd struggled a little bit in 2000. They'd gone undefeated, but they hadn't sort of mowed over the competition the way they did in 92 and 96. All of a sudden, an almost 20-point loss to a country that is not considered a basketball powerhouse, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, what is happening here?
Yeah, and I found that quote because they're as in part of the section where they're talking about the next game, and Peter Vesey again. He said, "I think Pat Riley said it. We should have sent the Pistons," and he's right. Role player, superstar, everything it's supposed to be. They have Stu Jackson, who failed with the Knicks, Wisconsin, Vancouver, and now he's in charge of picking the Olympic team. And then Dwyane Wade on this all section also said, "We're trying to get adjusted to the basketball. It's just so slippery. Even I can't palm it. Past practice was like little kids playing at first. The ball was just kicked and slipping out of people's hands. So that was in that section. So I thought I would bring it up. The next game they do
Wait,
win.
so who criticized Vesey? I thought you were saying it was Pat Riley who criticized Stu Jackson.
No. This was Peter Vesey said Peter Vesey was attributing the Pistons quote to Pat Riley, and then he transferred over and said, I think that was him saying that Stu Jackson failed everywhere.
That wasn't Riley. I'm just looking here at the New York Times article directly after this game, because I just kind of want to get a little bit of idea of a contemporary account. Puerto Rico is up 49-27 at halftime. This writer Damon Hack, who I think I don't know a lot about him, but he's a basketball writer who's been around for a while. He said says that the American offense seems to consist of two themes: turnovers and chipping paint off the rims with errant shots. The Americans didn't always choose to run back on defense, he said. The Puerto Rico is daring the Americans to shoot from the outside. Richard Jefferson shoots 1 from 8 in the first half, including a shot that hits the side of the backboard. He did it again in the second half on the opposite side of the court. Sean Marion airballs a 3-pointer, leading to audible gasps from the crowd. Dwyane Wade does the same thing from just inside the 3-point line. So it is not sort of crazy to think that maybe they're just not prepared.
So they go into the next game, which is against Greece, and they win. And again, this is like a road game for them because they're playing Greece in Athens. Also, Greece, the home of the Olympics in general. They win, but they win by 6. And the quote I have again here from Tolbert says, I don't know what's worse, not playing as hard as you can and getting beat by 19, or playing really hard and beating Greece by 6 points. So, after that loss, you can't say, they were sleepwalking, they were bored. They were obviously, playing as well as they were capable of playing in that game. And they still, tough crowd. They're playing, in a very hostile environment. But they still managed to only beat Greece by 6. So at this point, they've played 2 games. They've lost badly to Puerto Rico, and they've barely beaten Greece.
Yeah. And then next is Australia, which is another one. They win by 10, but it's not a blowout. No,
so they beat Australia in the next game, and then this going through this GQ thing. It's like they intersperse stuff about, I guess the team was staying at the Queen Mary 2. They stayed on a boat that was a ship that was docked. Because the basketball team never stays in the Olympic Village. That would be a logistical nightmare for them. So they were staying aboard the Queen Mary 2, and they're talking about, the different card games and stuff they played. And like club and stuff like that. I'm trying to see if I can find the quote I was looking for. So there's a quote here from Manu Ginobili. He said, "The rest of the world is getting better. The U.S. is getting bored." And then, so they go in the next game. They play Australia again, not traditionally a basketball power. They win that game by 10. And then they lose again to Lithuania by 4. So Lithuania, who, what was it, in 92, they won the bronze medal. Was that what it was, with the Grateful Dead uniforms?
I think they won the bronze in 2000. I don't know if what they had done before that. Because
the U.S. team beat Croatia. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, the U.S. beat Croatia in 2000, or in 92 rather. I don't remember who the bronze medal winner was. We could look that up real quick in a second. But the U.S. had only beaten Lithuania 85-83 in the semifinals in 2000, and that was their closest game of the whole Olympics in 2000. So they were very much a legitimate threat to the U.S. going into this.
Yeah, so that Lithuania, I just remember I pulled it up. Lithuania did win the bronze in 92. And do you know who they beat in the bronze medal game in '92?
Who?
The unified team.
What was it? Germany?
No, I think it was all the countries that up until a year before had been the Soviet men's basketball team.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, so they were the unified team because they gave them like a bit of a grace period where they could still play with the Soviet rosters, even though the Soviet Union wasn't in existence anymore. So, see, and I don't have anything specifically on the Lithuania game, but again, they've now lost for a second time. They've never lost twice in the same Olympics, and they're 2-2 now. They're like, I think at this point, they're probably not guaranteed a spot in the medal round yet.
Probably not.
2-2.
So I just have a couple things again, just pulling up a news account of this game. The Americans lead for most of this game. They're up at halftime. A guy by the name of Sarunas Jasikavičius is the apparently he had missed a 3-pointer 4 years earlier in Sydney that might have put Lithuania ahead of the U.S. in that year's Olympics to pull out a big upset. But he hit 3 in a row at the end of the fourth quarter in this 2004 game, and includes a rare 4-point play. He ends up finishing with 28 points. One of the assistant coaches on this team, on this Lithuanian team, do you know who it is?
No, who is it?
Don Nelson, the Hall of Fame coach. And
interesting.
He there's an interesting note here. He had done this 4 years previously, and he had been there when they only when Lithuania only lost by 2 to the US. Nelson, after the game in 2000, he vows that he's never going to coach actively against his home country again. So he doesn't go to this game, Lithuania and the U.S. in 2004. He watches the game from their hotel and sees the team that he's been helping out, upset the Americans. And, again, major celebrations in Lithuania that they too have upset this juggernaut U.S. Olympic team.
So I looked it up, and they actually did finish like the top. There was 12 teams, 8 of them advanced to the medal round, so they were never really in danger of not making the medal round.
I mean, I guess the only thing you could say is at this point they're 2-2.
Yeah.
How many games are in the round robin? 5?
They've won more. So in their group, they end up 3 teams finish 3-0, and then one team finished 3-2 rather, and one team finishes 5-0. Their other 2 are 1-4 and 0-5. Their last game is against Angola. Angola, famously the first team that the '92 team played. The Charles Barkley quote: "I don't know nothing about Angola except Angola's in trouble."
Yeah.
So they hammer Angola, like they beat them 89-52. This looks like, so it's 89-53. Excuse me. So after losing by 19. Winning by 6, winning by 10, losing by 4. They get a good old-fashioned beating of Angola in there, so they do advance to the medal round, but as like a lower seed in that, and certainly not a foregone conclusion that they're going to win 3 games in a row and win the gold medal at this point.
Now, can I ask you a question? And you may not know this. I didn't see it either. Did you find anything about why Emeka Okafor only played in 2 games in this whole Olympics?
No, I didn't. Did he get hurt, or
I don't know. I
just
looked,
not play him.
I looked and I didn't find anything, and everybody else played. Let me see. That's 2000. There's 2004. Everybody else played. Carmelo only played in 7 games. I don't know why that was. Everybody else played in all 8 games, but for whatever reason, Okafor only plays in 2 games, and I have no idea why that was. Anyway, I was looking because the Angola game was one of the games that Okafor actually played, and he played 12 minutes. And that was a blowout, like you said. So I'm inclined to think that maybe it was a coach's decision thing, because the most minutes that Okafor gets are in a game where they're blowing out the other team. So who knows? Maybe Larry Brown just didn't want to play all 12 guys.
So I have an article from June 26th of 2004, which for the record was the day after I graduated from high school. The article is Okafor to Olympics. Bobcats not thrilled.
Mm-hmm.
And it said the Bobcats didn't want him to play. Okafor, Bernie Bickerstaff, who was the GM of and the coach of the Bobcats, said, "We're somewhat concerned because all that basketball causes a lot of wear and tear and prevents you from being fresh at the start of the season." Okafor's agent said there are a lot of guys at his position, so who knows how much he'd even play.
Okay.
But even so, he's a young kid and he's not going to get worn out playing basketball. So maybe it was just that he was buried on the, deep on the depth chart and didn't play because they were almost every game was close except for that game. So maybe it was that.
So like you said, they beat Angola. That brings them into the knockout round, the tournament of 8.
Before we go too far, I got some quotes from this oral history again. Sarunas Jaskevicius, guard, Team Lithuania.
That's the guy I just mentioned, I think.
The worst talker on the court was Sean Marion. He kept saying miss when I would shoot, and I kept making them. The ball was coming off my fingers, and he'd say, "Miss, you F. Miss. You're in the NBA now. Miss like you should. F." After a while, he stopped because I kept making them. The waiter on the Queen Mary 2 said they ate too many hamburgers. They were always in line. That's why they lose. They cannot jump anymore. Dream Team is dead. It's over. We play team basketball. You can't be like Team USA. And then this was a funny article. It's talking about Stoudemire saying they were all trying to like find somewhere to go out and dance and go to the looking for the disco. And I have a quote from Juliana Mendes, who's a tourist from Brazil. It said, "One night I saw Carmelo and his friend. He told me they played on Denver and also USA. I didn't even know where Denver was. He said, Denver is like Los Angeles, but colder. Carmelo kept saying, I need to dance. I need to dance. He said he'd buy all my friends drinks at disco. He danced on the street to show me. And he's not a good dancer. He was funny. They kept asking me, where the disco? They smelled like they were drinking a lot." And then I have a quote from Anna Vamvoudakadis, who's a Greek fan. "U.S. players think they're sexy. They try to talk to you. They flirt. They say things like, I need someone to show me around town, but they don't. What they need is someone who can shoot." So I thought that was worth mentioning. But yeah, so you head into the semifinals. So it's, or not semifinals, the knockout round. So it's the top 8 teams advance to the knockout round. The U.S. is originally in their initial matchup of the playoff. Basically, they are matched up with Spain. They beat Spain 102-94. So again, a close win, but they do advance to the semifinals, and the finals would be called the medal rounds, because even if you lose in the semifinals, you're going to get a chance to play for the bronze medal. Not that they're thinking about that at this point, but they do advance at least that far.
They do.
And that sets up the semifinal game against Argentina, the team we talked about a little while ago. This became known as the Golden Generation in Argentina. The guys on this team, and I guess the team basically stayed together for about 10 more years, give or take a player or two. The quote from Manu Ginobili here is, "I saw their roster and I knew we would beat them." Greg Popovich said, "Against Argentina, Tim was officiated like he's never going to be officiated in the NBA. There were times he was absolutely knocked to the floor, kicked over, and trampled, and no call." Tim Duncan, "FIBA sucks."
Yeah, I saw that. My quote, I think my quote just said stinks, but I'm guessing I'm guessing sucks is what is actually what he says. And yeah, I mean, and that's sort of the interesting thing, is that for all that this team gets associated, again, rightly or wrongly, with kind of the young, you call it sort of the hip hop era of the NBA, the Iverson, LeBron, that whole thing. The guy who really sort of struggles the most is Duncan, and he is really one of the few guys of the stars. So I'll just kind of look at it again. I guess Iverson never goes to another. I don't think Iverson ever goes and plays in another Olympics.
But I don't think he was asked. Iverson is an interesting character in this because as easy as he would be to sort of scapegoat on this team, he, by all accounts, took, his responsibility seriously. He was very disappointed when they lost. He was a captain of the team. And I think he would have been willing to play again in 04, but by then he just, or 08, excuse me. Well, by 08, he probably would have played again, but by then his career was winding down. And especially with all those other guys looking to come, to play on that team, there wasn't really any room for him.
Well, the other thing too is he probably had less of a problem with Brown than some of these guys because he had played for Larry Brown in Philly, gone to the finals, and as good of as a relationship as Allen Iverson was ever going to have with any coach, I think he and Brown always really had a pretty strong mutual respect. So obviously by this point, Larry Brown is coaching Detroit, but that probably helped too with the Iverson thing.
And I've always said if Allen Iverson didn't, and I'm not justifying people who feel like this, but if Allen Iverson didn't have all the tattoos, didn't have the cornrows, didn't wear the baggy uniforms, and didn't have the reputation he had off the court, if Allen Iverson looked like Chris Paul looked with that game, old school basketball fans everywhere would have loved Allen Iverson.
I think that's probably mostly true. I mean, how far are you going to take it, though? Are you going to take sort of the practice rant and, because some of that stuff crossed over from on the court to off the court. You're right. The tattoos and stuff, that's whatever. That's just his personal appearance and his, how he chooses to live his life. But things like the practice rant and stuff, I don't think you can blame people for criticizing him for that type of thing.
Oh, no, I don't. And I was going to say some of that he brought on himself, and he obviously, the stories about him in Philadelphia and the fact that he wouldn't pack when they would go on
he
road
would just
trips.
go and just buy all new wardrobe and then just leave it there. Yeah.
And apparently him and his whole entourage, they just were, and I know exactly where this place was, at least I think still is. There's a TGI Fridays on City Line Avenue, right where the city and the suburbs meet. And that was the place he would hang out. That was his spot. Most nights when he was with the Sixers, you could just find him at that TGI Fridays with 30 people, but so anyway, but Iverson wasn't, Iverson was probably the least of this team's problems. He led the team, I think, in assists a few games, or he was one of the statistical leaders on the team. And I'm sure we'll talk about the 08 team in a minute, but when news got out that Iverson wouldn't be invited to try out for the 2008 Olympic team, he took the high road. He said, I think it's time to just leave that alone and let them go ahead and try to accomplish what they need to accomplish. I don't have anything negative to say about Jerry Colangelo. I don't have anything negative to say about the situation. So he did, go ahead.
And I want to talk a little bit about, like you said, the aftermath. But the other thing that you kind of alluded to this about Iverson, his career is essentially over by 08.
Oh, yeah.
He's I'm just trying to look here.
I think he's with Denver.
He's in Denver by this point. The following year would be when Denver traded him really early in the season after 3 games. And then in 08-09, he spends most of his time with Detroit. And then his career is basically over. Then he was in Memphis for 3 games at the beginning of the following season, and he quit. And then I think somehow he agreed. Memphis gave him his release, and he ended up finishing out playing another third of a season or so in Philly. So yeah, by 08, he's probably done, especially because you figure by 08, and I don't have the 08 roster right in front of me, but you got a lot of lot of guys who've really sort of come into their own in between 2004 and 2008. In the immediate aftermath of the loss, Jerry Colangelo, who's sort of in charge, he's sort of the guy who's running USA basketball. He convenes kind of a brain trust of American basketball here, and I thought I had seen the list of who it was that he gathered here. Oh, okay. So maybe he wasn't actually in charge yet until after this. Okay, now I'm remembering. After this, they bring together. They hire Jerry Colangelo, who'd been running the Phoenix Suns, and I think probably was continuing to do so. And he's now known as the managing director of the U.S. men's basketball team. And in 2005, he convenes a meeting that includes, listen to these four guys: Jerry West, Dean Smith, Larry Bird, and Michael Jordan. That's his sort of brain trust to put together the two. So two of the greatest NBA player of all time, one of the greatest in Bird, one of the greatest college coaches all time in Dean Smith, and then Jerry West, who in addition to being one of the 15 or 20 greatest players of all time, also is one of the greatest executives in NBA history. So, and somebody also who passed away this year, and we'll talk about probably quite a bit on our in memoriam coming up in a few months. And so, yeah, they and sort of the charge that's coming out of that is we need to put together a team, a group of guys that's going to be more of a basketball team and less of a just a collection of talent.
Yeah. So just to sort of make sure we highlight it appropriately, they lose by 8 to Argentina in the semifinals in a game that they're down the whole way. I think it was actually they were down bigger than that, and down by quite a bit, and the 8 was really about as close as it got. I don't think it was a nip and tuck game all the way where Argentina made a bunch of free throws at the end or anything like that. I think it was pretty much a romp that maybe got closer towards the end. And then they played Lithuania again, the Lithuania team that had beaten them by 4 in the group stage. They did beat them to at least salvage a bronze medal. It certainly disappointing by anybody's standards, but had they not even medaled at all, that would have been, even more embarrassing and lost a 4th game.
Yeah.
So, while I doubt many of the, because the thing is, you think, and it's like, it's easy to whatever, but it's like a guy who maybe that was their only Olympics they played in, they at least have an Olympic medal out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's something.
Yeah. So.
And by the way, I also should note that we were talking about how all those years, and so this is just me kind of going and looking back at previous years, but the U.S. boycotted in 1980, so that was another 4-year, another year where they didn't lose any games. So it wasn't quite the uninterrupted streak. So just to sort of correct the historical record there, in addition to losing in 88 and 72, and of course this year we also boycotted in 80. So that's worth mentioning too. Anyway, I'm sorry.
I think it's safe to say they would have won in 80, especially captained by LaSalle University's own Michael Brooks. So they lose, and obviously we'll talk about, briefly sort of what comes next, but I touched on it, and I have a couple of quotes here, and I couldn't find a contemporaneous article about it, but got quotes from Dwyane Wade and Grant Hill, of all people, who, Grant Hill is not exactly seen as a controversial figure too much, as from like he's not seen as like one of the forefathers of that hip hop generation of basketball players. But so Dwyane Wade said, I felt like a lot of people back in the States was rooting against us to actually not win the gold. And that's sad to say. And then Grant Hill said, there was so much negativity surrounding the team. I just felt people thought, here's 12 African Americans. Let's talk about they're not playing hard, or they're not doing this or doing that. Maybe it was a race thing. I don't know. I wanted them to win that semifinal game and win the gold just to kind of shut everybody up. Now, I'm not going to diminish any criticism of this team as purely racism, because the 2000 team, the 96 team, the 2008 team, most of these teams, including the 92 team, I mean, 92 had 4 white guys, I guess.
Yeah,
Stockton,
Leitner, Mullen, and Bird. Yeah,
and Bird. So, but most of the time, the team is going to be predominantly African American. I'm not going to purely diminish that. I remember an article at the time, or a part of an article, and I can't remember who wrote it, and I wouldn't know how to find it, but basically said, like, why is it okay that a bunch of like middle-aged white guys in the U.S. are rooting against their own national team?
well, I mean, but
Like,
why is it why wouldn't it be okay? I mean, it's sports; they can root for whoever they want.
it's a little different with your own national team, you don't think?
I mean, slightly, but I mean, again, I guess here's what I'll say. I don't, and maybe we shouldn't be the ones saying this given what we spend so much of our time on over the last 4 years, but like, I guess I just don't think of sports is that important. Like, I mean, I get it, but like, it's not like you're rooting against your own country in a war. It's like, if you're watching a sport and there's a bunch of guys that are dislikable, or even if the players aren't dislikable, if the way the team is approaching it is dislikable, and we just talked about a lot of the ways in which they were, sort of from Larry Brown on down. Yeah, I guess I mean, if you're doing it vociferously, or like you said, in a way that brings in race or brings in anything, that's a different thing. But as far as just rooting against them, I don't know, my attitude is it's sports. I mean, you can root against or for a team for whatever reason you want. I mean, how many people would root? I can't think of a good example, but like, you know, how many people, maybe if there's some underdog swimmer or runner in this year's Olympics, even if they're not from the U.S., would root for them against American? I understand the sentiment, but my attitude is like, if the team was that dislikable, and we talked about some reasons why they were, then what's the problem?
Yeah, I don't know that it can so casually be separated from any racial aspects.
And maybe not, but I'm just saying in the abstract, just the idea of rooting against the team. And like you said, though, it didn't happen in 2000. It didn't happen in 96. Like, there was something about this team that made them sort of dislikable, up to and including, a reporter talking about how they didn't seem to be trying very hard at times.
And I mean, I remember obviously the fallout to this was probably also, while this was like kind of similar to what you're saying here, it's like probably slightly also a bit overblown about how it was a stain on the U.S. culture of basketball or whatever. And it's like, all right, they lost a few games in the Olympics. But I think what became clear was the U.S. wasn't going to be able to coast to a gold medal with anybody anymore.
And let me just make another point that's sort of tangential a little bit. I don't know. I also kind of feel like it's kind of a good thing, just from a sports point of view. Like, if you have an Olympic, and I get that, David Stern didn't think this, Jerry Colangelo didn't think this, but if you have a sport that one country just wins every single time, it's like, it's a little boring, and kind of, it's like, why even play in the games?
Well, and that I agree with you on. And that's the U.S. women's national team just wins easily every year, and they might even win easily every game they play. That I agree with you on. I don't think it's good, and I don't even think it's particularly interesting when, like, what I used to always say, and it's not the case anymore, but like for that like 6-year period where UConn just basically went undefeated every year and won the national championship, the women's basketball team I'm talking about, I would say to people, like, you don't even really have to pay attention till the Sweet 16. So, like, why is this fun? Like, I get every individual year you're going to root for them, but, like, I remember one time watching them play, like, the second best team in their conference at the time, and they beat them by 55. And it was like, what is even the point of this until literally, like, the third to last game of the year? Like, you know what I mean? So, like, I agree with that. And I like now that, the 92 team, it was almost like those were basically like exhibitions. They were, and I don't mean exhibition in the sense of an exhibition game. I mean an exhibition in the sense of they were just showing off. It was
the Harlem Globetrotters.
Harlem Globetrotters. Yeah, that was basically what that was. That was fine that year. I am glad now that the team, and when this '08 team, and I remember this was when we were living together in, I think we were still in Arlington at the time, Virginia. I remember watching that gold medal game, and they had to work in that game. And I was glad they won, but I was also glad they had to work. Because if they had Olympic football, it would be really pointless and I wouldn't care.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? I don't want anything to be like that, so.
So in '08, it's some of the same guys, Wade, LeBron, Carmelo.
Those guys all have 4 additional years of basketball under their belts by then, too.
Yeah. Kidd is back. I don't know if I think Kidd was there in 2000. I know we just talked about how he wasn't there in 2004.
Mm.
Chris Paul, who's young, but is sort of the kind of point guard that we were talking about before. Kobe. Was Kobe there in 2000? I think he probably was, right?
I believe so.
Okay, so they bring some guys back who had been on the 2000 team. Kobe was not there in 2000. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that was a big deal that they got Kobe in '08, if I'm remembering correctly, because he had never gone to an Olympics before.
And what I remember about this '08 team as well was they really went out of their way to embrace the Olympics as well. Again, they can't stay in the Olympic Village. They'd be celebrities there. But they spent a lot of time in the Olympic Village. A lot of the players, and Kobe specifically, very famously, were at tons and tons of Olympic events that year. The swimming, that was the Michael Phelps year, the big Michael Phelps year when he won all those gold medals. Kobe was at as many of those as he could be. And I remember, and I've probably told this story 3 other times on this podcast already.
This is synchronized swimming?
Yes. All right. So should I not tell it because I've told it so many times?
I don't think that many people have listened to all 95 episodes we've done. You can tell a story more than once.
Yeah. So he was doing a press conference and they were saying to him like, oh yeah, you've been to the sprinting, you've been to this, you've been to that. Like, and he's like, yeah, I'm sad. I'm not, like, we have a practice or whatever. Like, I'm not gonna be able to go to synchronized swimming. And all the reporters laughed at him. And he was like, no, I'm being serious. He's like, you guys try that. He's like, I know I wouldn't be able to do that. So I like that story. I don't know. Maybe I find a reason to work it in too often, but like, so those guys did really go out of their way to do that. And the Redeem Team thing is, it does smack of marketing and it's a little bit cloying, I guess. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, they really did redeem U.S. basketball and made it a thing that the 12 best players in the NBA don't go every single Olympics, but it's not a thing we're just automatically like, yeah, I'm not going. Like, LeBron James at his age at this point is going to play in the Olympics this year.
Yeah, no, they've sort of reestablished it to where, other than it's funny because on the one hand, they've reestablished it as the fact that like the big stars want to go. But then on the other hand, they've made it so that it's not all the big stars all the time. Keldon Johnson can get on the team if the coach wants him. So how many years? So I was looking, it's sort of interesting to look and go back. And again, I'm going to go kind of way back here. Hank Iba was the coach. He was a long time college basketball coach who also coached the Olympics, I think 3 years in a row, or 3 Olympics in a row. He was there 64, 68, 72. Starting in 76, it was sort of a rotating. 76 was Dean Smith. 1980 was Dave Gavitt, who was the coach at Providence for about 10 years in the 70s, but is best known as the first commissioner of the Big East in the 1980s. It would have been him in 80 had there not been the boycott. And then starting in 84, it kind of again becomes kind of a who's who. Bobby Knight, John Thompson, and then in 92, not only do they start giving it to NBA players, but they start with NBA coaches. So it's Chuck Daly, Lenny Wilkins in 96, Tom Janovich, and then Larry Brown. But then in '08, they kind of go back to the original and back to college players, back to sort of a different type of approach. And Krzyzewski actually does it for 3 Olympics in a row. He does it 8, 12, and 16. Since then, they've kind of gone back to the sort of one-off NBA players. It was Popovich, now it's Steve Kerr, and who knows what it'll be in 2028. But they kind of, in that way, kind of went back to the original approach, too, of, having a college coach who was there for many cycles through many Olympics.
So, it's...
And there's one more thing I want to touch on that's only sort of a little bit tangential, but I'll let you go first.
No, go ahead. My thing was I was just more going to summarize. So if you go ahead.
So this isn't necessarily specific to the Olympics, but just a frustrating situation. Larry Brown and Stephon Marbury.
I was thinking the same thing.
At each other's throats throughout the Olympics. So a year later, why not decide to unite Larry Brown and Stephon Marbury again on the Knicks in what might be the worst season of the Knicks, of sort of this post-Ewing era of the 21st century when, you've just kind of had, a good year and then 3 years of disaster and then another good year and then another 3 or 4 years of disaster. This was when the Knicks brought in Larry Brown and everybody thought it was going to be the second coming of, I don't even want to know what. And they actually, in this 05-06 season, they end up being worse than they'd been even in the previous years. They go 23.
They go 23 and 59.
23 and 59. Do you have that like burned in your brain?
Yep.
Yeah, they were brutal. And my point being that year was Marbury and Larry Brown again after they, if they can't get along when they've got teammates like LeBron, Carmelo, Duncan, Dwyane Wade, how the heck do you expect them to get along when you're throwing Stephon Marbury out there every night with such legendary figures as Eddie Curry, Quentin Richardson? God, this was such a weird team. Lots of guys who were just like okay players in their careers, but never for the Knicks. Malik Rose, Jamal Crawford.
Crawford had some good years with the Knicks.
Yeah, Jalen Rose, Steve Francis, Penny Hardaway is on this team for 4 games. Antonio Davis. Ime Udoka plays 8 games for the Knicks in the 05-06 season. Anyway, I don't know. I was reading this and I was like, hold on a second. Wouldn't they have been reunited a year later on the? Yeah, they were. So good move, Isaiah.
The sequel everyone demanded.
Exactly. Anyway, why don't you put a bow on it?
Yeah. So, I mean, you look back and you kind of think, all right, it's a team that, I don't even know. Like, is it even necessary to put it in a historical context? Is it important enough? And I know we just did an episode on it, so it sounds like, why am I saying this? But like, I don't know, to put it into like, if it were important enough to be that anything could be a great stain on U.S. men's Olympic basketball, like on the court, this would be it. But I don't know. I feel like that's overstating the case. You know what I mean? I feel like it's an interesting case study in a team that's put together sort of irrespective of worrying about any chemistry and, is the coach the right man for the job? And truthfully, even a coach with all those guys, or even a team with the best players in the NBA, Larry Brown still would probably not have been the right coach for that team. They probably would have won the gold medal by sheer preponderance of talents. But like, Larry Brown is probably just not the right guy to coach an Olympic team like that.
No, probably not. I guess what I would say is that what's interesting about it is first of all just the fact that we were still at a point where it really mattered that they didn't win.
Mm-hmm.
So much so, I mean, and look, I don't like a lot of Adam Silver's sort of approach to basketball as commissioner, but this is not necessarily even meant as a criticism of him specifically. But like when they lost this Olympics in 2004, David Stern was angry and wanted something done about it. If they lose this year, 20 years later, I don't think Adam Silver would care one way or the other. And I'm not even saying that necessarily to cast aspersions on him. I just think that he's different than Stern. The sport is different. The sport is so much more international now. And I don't even know who's playing and who's not for some of these other countries. But like, you know, when's the last time an American player even won the MVP? 5 years ago? You know, it's been Jokic, it's been Embiid. Like,
Embiid's officially an American now. He's on the U.S. team. But
okay, but fair.
But you mean, yeah, I mean, he's not an American-born and raised player. Like,
yeah, and he could have played in the Olympics for another. You know, where is he from originally?
I think Cameroon.
Cameroon. That's what I was going to say too. You know, so it's just, I mean, you know, Doncic, who hasn't won an MVP. You know, it's not. You know, and even since 2004, you know, Nash, Nowitzki, you know, guys have won MVPs. It is very, very much an international sport. So I don't think if they were to lose today, they would be convening. Now, you know, Dean Smith has passed away, but I don't think they'd be, and so is Jerry West, but they wouldn't be convening those guys to talk about what do we do next. So it's interesting that it was sort of like maybe the last time that it really, really mattered to the U.S. basketball structure that the American Olympic team had lost. So,
yeah, and I think 2008 was the last thing where it was like, this will be a big problem if they don't win the gold.
And I think it's
once
also,
that was good.
I think it's also interesting just because like Magic and Bird on, everybody else almost has, you know, who's an American has won a gold medal. Magic, Bird, Jordan, Shaq, Kobe, you know, Akeem even, you know, and, you know, LeBron, Wade, Carmelo, Durant, all these guys who have won Olympic gold. The one guy who hasn't, that's sort of that upper echelon of all-time greats is Duncan, you know.
Yeah, that was the only team he was on.
Yeah, he never wanted to do it again. Like you said, he said FIBA stinks and he'd never play again. And he never did.
All right. Well, at least he kept his word, I guess. But you're right. I guess he's got enough titles where he doesn't need that to cement his legacy. But still, you're right. It's kind of a weird thing to think about.
Yeah, it is sort of. And you associate the team with some of those other guys who were younger and, you know, maybe more typical of the NBA player of the time. But the guy who never got another chance to win one of sort of the top guys. I mean, I don't think Okafor was ever on another team, but like of the real sort of all-time greats on that team, the guy who never wins one is Duncan.
And one of the reasons he lost was because of Manu Ginobili. So.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's an interesting. This was kind of neat. It was, you know, I like you kind of like I sort of remember it, but kind of just, you know, I think the other thing too is, and this kind of goes without saying, is that the Olympics aren't always the easiest thing to watch, and especially in those days when it was before DVR and a lot of those things, and you know. I was in college. I was living in Boston. You know, I had cable, but didn't have a ton of cable channels. Like, it wasn't always easy if the game was airing, you know, not during prime time. It wasn't always easy to kind of catch up with it later. So,
and I looked at the dates of these Olympics, and it was August 13th to the 29th.
Yeah, it was late. Yeah,
and I moved into college for the first time on the 26th.
Yeah.
So it was the bronze medal game may have been like the day I moved into college. I knew it was right around then. Mm-hmm. I didn't know it actually overlapped like that much. So
Cool. Well, this was a cool episode. This was, you know, this is probably the closest you're going to get. And I direct this largely to my wife. This is probably the closest you're ever going to get from Andrew and me to a an episode devoted entirely to the Olympics. So
Yeah, because I don't know the Olympics, like even a specific Olympics. There's like a million sports. So what do you talk about?
honestly, and we'll end after this, folks. But honestly, the only thing I could theoretically see that would be kind of fun to do would be the first Olympics. Just
Oh, like ancient Greece?
no, like 1896.
Okay. Yeah.
Just to talk about like kind of some of the like what went into it coming together, because I don't know the story, but I'm sure it must have been interesting. I mean, why had sports in 1896 reached the point where they were ready to do this when they weren't in 1860 or 1780 or whatever? So there's probably like transportation and all those things. So that's part's interesting. And then also some of the sports were around. Like I think in 1904 they did the live pigeon shoot, which
If we were a really self-important stuffed shirt podcast, we'd be like, we're going to do one on the 36 Berlin Olympics, and we're going to talk about the intersection of sport and its role within a larger global community. But I wouldn't be able to make wrestling references during that. So
I actually have to add one more thing, and I probably shouldn't joke about this, but it's funny. You've listened before sometimes when you and I have been together. I throughout the years I've created like a great sports moments playlist, and I've like, whether it's things that are available on YouTube Music or like I've uploaded CDs and all these things. It's like probably like at this point it's probably like 1,500 like great sports moments that range from like 20 seconds to 20 minutes of the clips. It's just radio broadcasts and everything. And I found online on YouTube Music, it's like great sports moments of the 20th century. So I was like, all right, let me just add this to my playlist. But one of the tracks is Hitler opening the 36 Olympics.
that's right. He throw the javelin?
No, it's like his speech. And so the other day I'm listening and like it had just finished up like a clip about like the Cubs winning
Garvey.
it was like the Cubs winning the NLCS in 2016, and then all of a sudden Hitler's talking, and I'm just like, let me delete Hitler from the sports moments playlist.
I think you're brave for doing that. I think you're a real truth teller there.
Yeah, I'm making a stand. All right, well,
Hitler, as is this podcast.
All right, well, I hope
we constitutionally cannot do an episode that's this quick. So now we're
exactly. Exactly.
All right.
Well, we'll catch you all next time with probably less Olympics and less Hitler in our next episode. But until then, I'm Dan Newman.
And I'm Andrew Newman. Goodbye, old sports.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.